What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Music here, bringing you people the week 4 of the free agency and trade transactions. Once again, to those that don't know how this works, there will be a link down below in the description which links you to the week 1 of the free agency and trade transactions, so do check it out and come back to this video if you want to know the rules. That being said, this week was full of trades and transactions. So let's start off with Malo, aka the coach of the Cincinnati Loudreds, who decided to make a trade with the coach of the San Francisco Arcaniners, aka George, and that is by exchanging his Umbreon for his Gastrodon. So here's the thing. As far as Malo's case goes, it is once again what you call an opportunity cost, because he's gaining something from this trade but also losing something at the same time. Now, let's focus on the positives here. From obtaining Gastrodon, Malo finally has an immunity to Scaldbars, which is greatly appreciated. It also finally gives him a wall that can actually recover its HP. And considering its amazingly high HP stat, it is allowed to be a bulky on both sides, just like Umbreon. That, and if there's anything that Miguel has taught me, is the fact that Gastrodon can actually sweep. And that is by getting curses up, and if the opponent's check to it is gone, I think it's safe to say that game is already over from there. But while he is gaining all these luxuries, he's also losing something very crucial for his team, which I believe is too hyper-offensive to be effective in the League format, and that is a cleric. See, the thing is, while Malo's team was infested with walls that had no sort of recovery whatsoever, at least he still had a cleric with him, which he could have used to bring his walls back up to a decent amount of HP with Wish and heal well off the status, aka Umbreon. But now, all of that is gone, and sadly, it has now opened up a huge glaring weakness to his squad, and that is being prone to status, which means that once a Toxic or Woolwist goes off, there is literally no turning back. And with the added handicap of these walls having no sort of reliable recovery whatsoever, I see it coming back to bite Malo really, really hard. So I don't know how to feel about this trade, to be perfectly honest. Like, I probably said this in each and every single one of these videos like a broken tape recorder. In the end, it all comes down to how he plays his cards. But if I were to have a say in this, I really don't think it's accomplishing much here, but rather is creating an even bigger hole for his squad. As for his first transaction, which to be clear by the way, counts as his 2 out of 3 changes, Malo decided to drop Empoleon for Forretress, and up to a certain extent I do actually see where he's coming from. From what I'm being led to believe, Malo is trying to turn his squad into something similar to which he had back in Season 4 of the GBA, and considering that he's fully aware and has legitimate experience in using Forretress, I can understand why he'd want to repick that Walnut in this Season 2. And for what it's worth, it does indeed give him a 3rd Stealth Rocker, which means that he can switch up the movesets on Landorus Terrain and Azelf much more instead of being forced to run Stealth Rock on one of these mons, which would be really problematic. And it also gives his squad the new ability of hazard stacking, since we all know that Forretress can set up any kind of hazards minus sticky webs. It also gives him a mon that has access to Volt Switch, and since his team is as hyper-offensive as it gets, it may turn out to make things for him much more easier, considering that he has Mega Manectric to Volt Switch too, and Azelf to U-turn, along with Landorus Terrain to U-turn too. So that's always nice. That, and I can also see why he chose Gastrodon too, because since by losing Empoleon he was losing access to a Scald user, he now has that fat slug to fill that role, and his Forretress to carry out the hazard removal while still managing to keep his own hazards up. And while this means that a Ghost is all it takes to spin block Forretress, it can Volt Switch right into Weavile and pursue trap his spin blocker, so I'll have to give Malo props on that. Unfortunately though, despite all these benefits, it also must be taken into consideration that his 2 new walls have quad weaknesses, which his opponent can easily capitalize on. And when you take that, and all these other drawbacks into consideration, along with the fact that Malo's playstyle just doesn't suit hyper offense at all, I'd say that all of it isn't improving his team at all, but rather opening new weaknesses for his team which his opponent can easily capitalize on. But that's just me. Now on to George, who gave away his Gastrodon for Umbreon though. I think that George just hit the jackpot on this one, because now he has a 2nd cleric and a Pokemon to have the liberty to pass wishes off, which means that his walls in the form of Goodra, Bronzong, and defensive Nidoqueen can actually get their HP back and make the other GBA competitors scream Bloody Mary. Not only that, but it getting poisoned or burned or paralyzed is actually a blessing because of Synchronize itself, and also the fact that it can heal Bell it off, thereby making its opponents much more hesitant to go for a status inflicting move. That as a whole makes his squad much more threatening than it already is, and I do most definitely think that it will work out for him in the long run. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to the last two transactions which were made by none other than Steve aka M4 Needs, whatever the hell his name is, who decided to drop his Dugtrio for Mesprit and Kecleon for Alomomola. And let me tell you that Steve made the absolute best decision that he possibly could, and I'll tell you why. See, through exchanging his Dugtrio for Mesprit, he is still retaining a Stealth Rocker and having an immunity to ground types too while he's at it. And its defense stats too allow it to be bulky on both sides, and coming from a guy who has experience in facing it before, it can be a huge pain to deal with. Not to mention its insane move pool, giving it the liberty to be physically offensive or specially offensive. It can be a total game changer too, because it is also a fantastic user of Thunder Wave and its trump card being Healing Wish, which if used at the right time can actually scream the end of the game. Oh, and it also gives him a check to Landorus Incarnate, which is currently the scariest thing out there in the League format. So, all in all, it was a very good choice by Steve. As for his second transaction, once again he made a very good choice because why was Kecleon even in his roster in the first place? I mean, I don't get the significance in having a freaking Gecko in your squad that does absolutely nothing for it. I mean, so what if it has protein? The fact still remains unchanged that it can't do anything. This isn't Mystery Dungeon Explorers of the Sky. Steve didn't even use this thing in these past few weeks either, so I personally think it'd be an understatement to call it a dead weight. Alomomola though, on the other hand, opens a lot of doors for his team. Why? Because now, he finally has a defensive Pokemon that can actually be a cleric, which means that he won't have to rely on Wish, Heal Bell, Mega Gardevoir, thank god I never saw him use that, to heal up his partners, and anybody who has experience with using Alomomola should know by now that it is a very good physically defensive Pokemon. While it is somewhat frail on the special side, it still does have an insane HP base stat of 165. And when you pair that with Regenerator, I think it's pretty much self-explanatory of how difficult it will be to bring it down. And who could ever forget the oh so glorious skull burns that this pink fish can spread? So, after all of that, I think it's safe to assume that Steve's Alomomola is going to spread Alamo Ebola. Last but not least, we have the manly version of Justin Bieber, Lars aka El Cesar, who decided to drop his Sandslash for Luxury and Regirock for Delphox. And after talking with him about his transactions, I have to say that I fully support what he did, and if anything, it will make his squad 1,000 times more effective. So let's start off with Regirock for Delphox. Now, before the transaction was made, I think it was pretty evident that when you looked at Lars' squad, it lacked the Fire, Water, Grass core, since he never had a Fire type to finish it. With Delphox around, now it's completed. And while I get the fact that Delphox isn't necessarily the best when it comes down to Fire types, it still doesn't necessarily change the fact that it can put in massive work. And believe me, I'd know that since I got my playoff spot taken away from me by it. It can play the role of a Trick Scarfer, Sub-CM Sweeper, and has an okay coverage too. And if it is turned a blind eye too, it most definitely will lead to the undoing of your squad. So, therefore, I do think that he made a very good choice by dropping Regirock for Delphox. Now, with Regirock gone, a weakness was created for his squad. And that weakness is not having an answer to bird spam anymore. So to fix this newfound weakness, Lars decided to drop Sandslash for Luxury because it can actually take flying type moves quite well, especially with the Intimidate ability equipped. It also gives him an electric type which he did not have before, so this gives him another effective way to deal with bulky water types instead of relying on putting coverage moves of Tangrowth. So that is something which I believe is greatly appreciated for his squad. And, for what it's worth, Its access to Guts may just make his opponent think twice before going for either Will-O-Wisp or Toxic. Because when you combine Guts with a very good attack stat of 120, quoting Russell Peters here, somebody gonna get hurt real bad. And while he was losing a spinner in the process, he still does have Crobat to do the hazard removing by defogging. And his entire squad overall isn't that weak to hazards in the first place, which is why I believe that these transactions were indeed very desirable for the Borashadon fans, and this may just bring them one step closer to the GBA title. So that concludes this week of the free agency and trade transactions. Once again, thank you so much for watching, guys. Do let me know in the comment section down below what you think of these trades and transactions, and I'll see you all next time. Stay awesome and take care. Bye bye.